Struggling to make sense of your website's data? Wondering how AI is changing the game of SEO and PPC? In this episode, we chat with Chloe Christine, a data whiz who helps businesses unlock the power of their website analytics. Buckle up as we stride into the exciting world of data-driven marketing and explore how AI is transforming the landscape. This is PhraSEOlogy AI with your host, Felipe Santos. As a digital marketing professional specializing in SEO for over 20 years, I've worked with companies from startups to global Fortune 500 companies. Learn how to gain an unfair advantage from AI as we uncover tips, tools, and strategies for a killer edge. Chloe is a global citizen who has a passion for data. Having lived in over 10 countries and speaking multiple languages, Chloe brings a unique perspective to the world of analytics and digital marketing. From Google Ad Management to GA4, Chloe's really a data guru that has worked across helping businesses mature their analytics and go beyond basic analytics to truly understand their online presence and apply it in today's world. So with that being said, Chloe, why don't you expand a little bit more on your background and let people know a bit more about you?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here. I started out work actually in Google Ads. So when I was 17, about 10 years ago, I took an apprenticeship, which was primarily a Google Ads apprenticeship. I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was a business admin apprenticeship, but it turned out to be all for Google Ads. And I also kind of got thrown in at the deep end a little bit with things like Google Analytics and even building landing pages, stuff that was maybe slightly out of scope of what I should have been doing. After a year of doing that, I decided to start doing freelance work, again, primarily for Google Ads, but also a little bit of SEO, a little bit social ads. And then a few years into doing that, I was absolutely sick to death of reports. I'm spending I think it took me about 2 days every single week to write my reports for my different clients across the different things I was doing. And I was sick of it. And I thought, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So I took what I had been doing, which was in Canva. So they look quite good, but they took forever. And I decided to try and find a way to basically automate what I was doing in Canva. Exactly the same thing. Every single page is the same, but automated. And that led me down the road to data visualization and Looker Studio. And initially it was really just for myself because I was sick of the reports. But over time, more and more people started asking me, how do you do this? How are you doing all this reporting? Can you do it for me? So in the last 4 years, I've made a big switch. I still do some Google Ads work, a little bit of social ads work, but I'm not gonna lie, I do try and avoid it. A little bit of SEO work, but more from a data perspective than anything else. The vast majority of my work now is data visualization and helping businesses understand their data, but also I do a lot of data integrity work. So making sure that the data they are getting from platforms like Google Analytics is as accurate as it can possibly be. We need it to be as accurate as possible to make the right decisions about what is and isn't working on our websites.
That is amazing. Well, quite a background there. And I'm glad you're actually gracing everybody with this knowledge, because there are a lot of folks that probably are running into the same wall and thinking, how do I solve for this? And probably coming to you. And if they haven't found you yet, this is their opportunity to find you. We're going to be talking about understanding website data. Chloe, for businesses that are overwhelmed with this concept of collecting website data and kind of what do we do with it and all of that, like, I would love to know from you where you think they should begin. Like, what's the best starting point for them to collect good data, as you mentioned?
So firstly, use the most widely available tools because they're going to be the ones that are the easiest to access and probably the ones that have the most information available about them. So Google Analytics is a really popular one. It's going to gather data from basically everything that happens on your website. Using things like Google Analytics can be really helpful, but I think there's some steps that you need to take before you start using it in order to properly assess what it is that you're trying to actually gain from this tool, people often, I think, kind of dive in at the deep end and they'll look at user numbers, they might look at engagement rate and things like that, but they're not really thinking about how this plays into their longer term goals for their business or for their company, for the marketing strategy. So I normally try to work backwards with people. There's usually one overarching goal that somebody has, the purpose of the website. 9 times out of 10, if not more often, that's going to be generate leads or make sales. There's very rarely there's a few other overarching goals, but normally it's sales or leads. And then you can work backwards from there. Well, what influences those sales and leads? You're going to be thinking about things like conversion rate then, and then backwards from there, you're going to be thinking about, well, what impacts conversion rate? Well, that's in part at least going to be impacted by how many users are we getting, what's the engagement of those users like, and how does that vary across the different traffic channels that we're generating users from on the website. So I think think about the overarching goal and then all the different factors that influence that. And I like to think about it almost as a flow chart. So your overarching goal is the little box at the top, and it's probably leads or sales. And then coming off that, you'll have all the kind of subsections that lead to those leads or sales. Normally right down at the bottom, you've got things like website traffic and users, and then that will lead into, well, how did they interact with the website? Did they sign up for our newsletter? And all of that's just leading into the overarching goal.
That is super helpful. And I think a lot of folks will benefit from just like thinking that way anyway, because it'll help them also understand what they might want to automate, right? I think it's like not just understanding what they need to collect and how they need to look at it, but that too. I'm curious with GA4, there's been a lot of controversy like over I think the last 2 years that when it was being built and put out there, betaed, and then now like it's live, that it doesn't have the same thing as Universal Analytics has. But have you figured some ways around? Is it like more mature now?
I definitely think it has improved a lot since it came out. We were told it was coming. We decided we didn't like it, so we avoided using it until the very last minute. And then everybody panicked and went, oh gosh, I don't know how to use this thing. It's very different. What am I doing? Google Analytics 4 is not inherently bad. I do believe, though, for a lot of people, it is misunderstood. People are so used to universal analytics because we had it for so long. I mean, I'm fairly certain that was what was being utilized when I first started, which was 10 years ago. So you're talking like at least 9 years, maybe even longer of universal. But most of the metrics are the same. The data and the information that you can get out of it is more or less the same. There's a few differences and a few definitions have changed, but generally speaking, it offers the same thing as it did before. It's just the layout is different, how you find that information is different. And I think that's what's kind of scared people a little.
Makes sense. And that's a good way to put it, because I believe that is exactly what people were encountering. It's just such a fundamental shift from what they were used to doing day in and day out with Universal Analytics. So I'm put it that way. And I feel like it may just require a lot more customization to get it the way that you might have wanted it through Universal, right?
But I think in a lot of ways that's a good thing, because Universal Analytics was far less customizable. But because we were so used to it, and that was the information you got, and this was how it was laid out, and that was kind of it, we just sort of accepted that. With GA4, there's so much you can do. I've posted a couple of pretty basic videos on LinkedIn about how you can just customize the reporting lists down the left-hand side of the interface. So you can create reports for like just reporting on referral traffic, or reports that highlight just traffic from social media, so you can see how many users you had from LinkedIn versus Facebook, and have those as like pre-saved reports in there. And it's actually very easy to do, but I think either people don't realize you could do it because there is a bit of a lack of information online about GA4. Maybe they just haven't got the information and the tools available to them to set things like that up. But ultimately, the concept of it, the key metrics that you get from it are exactly the same, give or take what we got in Universal Analytics.
Well, we're definitely going to have to put a link to either those videos or to some of your posts about how to do that, because the turnkey nature of what UA was in the past, I think, is what people just struggle with. It's like now we have to set everything to already just be there. Totally understand, like you said, better for the business because it's detailed. They have to understand how it's set up, and at the end of the day, much like capturing exactly what they want to capture.
Yeah, it's less out the box. And I don't think it was necessarily created with the average user in mind. I think it was created with marketers, maybe even developers in mind.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean it's bad. You just might need some assistance in getting it to where you want it to be.
Well, switching gears just a little bit, clearly businesses are trying to get their heads around this, make sure they have good analytics, and different businesses with different in terms of their analytics. What are some common pitfalls that you've seen businesses make when analyzing website data and maybe even getting these packages, set up correctly?
So I think the biggest thing that comes up is the issue of data integrity. People don't realize that their analytics is underreporting, overreporting. We see it a lot with conversions, or they're now technically called key events, but we won't get into why that changed and why Google thought that was a good idea. But I think ultimately the biggest issue we see is with data integrity. If you're not sure if your analytics is set up correctly, if it's recording correctly, and I have also posted some information, some tools about this on LinkedIn as well. I did one post where we looked at if you map your GA4 organic sessions against your Search Console clicks, they should more or less, and it won't be perfect, but they should more or less align with one another. If you're registering 200 organic sessions the last month, but 800 clicks in Search Console, your Google Analytics is probably not picking up all of your website traffic. And that could be because of misplacement of the code. It could be because of cookies issues, loads of different reasons. But before you even start to analyze your data, I think the next biggest issue goes back to what we were talking about at the start. People are not correctly thinking through what data they should be looking at and analyzing. And there's nothing wrong with just jumping in and having a play around and see what you can find in there. I encourage people to do that, but have your end goal, or maybe there's several goals in mind. If the goal is leads, well, what actually is impacting those leads? So maybe you're looking at website traffic use, maybe you're looking at conversion rate by traffic source, but really think about, maybe even just brainstorm some stuff on a piece of paper somewhere. Really have a think about what you're trying to understand from the data.
Makes sense. And when you talk about obviously the integrity and I guess going into auditing your data, auditing how your GA is set up, are there any tools or methods that you recommend folks try out to audit that?
So with Google Analytics, you can have a go at what I just mentioned about mapping things like organic sessions against Search Console clicks, because your Search Console clicks in theory should pretty much always be more or less accurate, because it's
Mhm.
not like a code that you install on the website. It's just what Google are picking up from your organic presence. So that's one kind of easy way to tell. The other way you can tell with conversion actions is to look at conversion or key event user count by event or conversion count. So for some events or conversions, we expect more or less a one-to-one ratio of user to conversion. So things like form submissions, phone call clicks, even newsletter signups and things like that, you generally expect one user. If your Google Analytics is telling you that you've had 3 form submissions for every user that submitted a form, it's over-reporting somewhere. And that's another kind of really easy way to check if your data might not. Unfortunately, then I think the only other thing to do would be to actually just pay somebody to come in and a professional to do an audit, and they will look at things in a little bit more detail, like your referral traffic exclusions, internal traffic exclusions, to make sure that you're excluding your own IP address, and if you work in an organization, your colleagues' IP addresses. And on an overarching level, that might not make much of a difference. If you have 10,000 website traffic users a month, the 100 people in the office visiting once a month probably isn't going to make a massive amount of difference. But where it does make a difference is when you start looking at granular data. So if you post a blog and everybody in your office building has visited that blog because it's a new blog post and maybe somebody's posted about it somewhere in the internal newsletter or something, everybody's been visiting it, but you actually are only really interested in who's visiting it from outside the organization, you need to look at internal traffic filters to make sure data from internally is being filtered out. properly if that's what you're trying to achieve. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do, but hopefully those are just some kind of simple tips to start out.
That's super helpful. Yeah, and I think that's great, especially like comparing the numbers, just doing a small audit to see if you're experiencing any problems after implementation, or going in and making new reports. And in terms of carrying that over, I know that a lot of businesses, or let's say practitioners, look at vanity metrics and kind of don't always look at the best things for actionable insights that they should. So I would love to know from you, like, what are the dangers of doing that, like, from your perspective?
I think sometimes things get misjudged, would probably be the best word. I've worked with a lot of people before. In fact, I was writing a report this morning where the company's website traffic was fairly consistently on the rise, especially from organic search. It looked to be going really well, but their conversion numbers weren't shifting. They had not really changed at all in the last 6 months, very, very steady. So you've got the situation where they're somehow driving more traffic to the site, but they're not driving more conversion. Now, obviously that requires much deeper analysis, and it may be that there's just like one or two blogs that are driving loads of traffic, but they don't convert very well. There could be a lot of underlying reasons for it. But I think ultimately, this kind of goes back to what we were saying about having the end goals in mind. Mm-hmm. Those end goals are going to determine your KPIs. So if you start looking at not necessarily the wrong data, because I think this idea of vanity metrics and non-vanity metrics sometimes gets thrown around a lot. And I think sometimes we automatically come to the conclusion that those vanity metrics are not useless, but maybe not as helpful. But actually, sometimes they are. Because they probably play a role in getting you to that end goal. So when you actually start to map out what's important at what stage of your user journey, right at the start of that user journey, maybe total users, active users is one of the most important goals, because total users impacts conversions most of the time. So yeah, I think having the end goal in mind all the time, and just sitting down, maybe you do this with a team. If you have a marketing team or you work as part of a marketing team, you sit down with them and you say, what are we actually trying to achieve here? Thinking about different channels as well. What are we trying to achieve from social media? Are we trying to drive traffic from social? Okay, great. So we need to be looking at social traffic users. But then off the back of that, we need to break that down by channel. And off the back of that, we need to look at users versus conversions per channel, because you might find that one or two social channels has a much higher conversion rate than another. And if our end goal is conversions, well, we need to be putting more effort into the ones that convert the best. So you kind of go through this like full cycle. And I think thinking of it in that kind of flow chart, or maybe even a mind map, is literally a windy road, like a roadmap that people go down. And in my head, I picture the road and I think about what's the first question that people are going to ask. Normally, these are people as well outside of the marketing team, because they tend to be people that want a broader knowledge of what's going on. Normally, one of those first questions is, well, how much website traffic did we get? And then the next question from that normally naturally is something like, where did that website traffic come from? Next question from that is normally something to do with conversions. How many leads did we get from that? And you end up with this kind of, in your head, this road that people go through as they think about their data. And I think that's also a really great way to think about it.
That is a sweet segue, because obviously I think since we're all visual creatures, data visualization makes so much sense from the perspective of having something that is a little clearer to see, because data can be very confounding to many and sometimes it's not so pretty. But if you have a way to identify those opportunities, those gaps, I'd love to know from you, because again, you've built so many of these like beautiful dashboards and they clearly articulate the questions in visual form. What has been the most exciting kind of data visualization project that you've worked on?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually, it sounds a bit random, but I actually really enjoyed the ones that kind of revolve around some sort of theme. So towards the back end of last year, we did some visualizations, just very, very basic visualizations to help people understand their data around Christmas. So we were looking mainly at e-commerce, where obviously sales are through the roof across Christmas. And we also did some Black Friday stuff. And the Black Friday stuff really did follow that kind of what I was just talking about with the roadmap. The most common question was, well, how much traffic did we get over that period, and how much higher was that than normal? How much higher were our sales than normal? So we went through a visualization of that, and that was really interesting. But honestly, get asked for all sorts of different things, even things in finance. So not necessarily marketing data. Sometimes it'll be financial data, loads of different visualizations. I think if you scroll back through my LinkedIn, there's, I don't know how many. I think we're probably over 100 at this point.
That's pretty fascinating. And clearly, like you said, themes can be very fun because you already have a concept in mind. It's a little easier to map. I think people should definitely explore them because you have posted quite a few, even in the last couple of months. Let me ask you another question then. Based on the visualization aspect of this and accessibility to certain tools like Google Search Console and GA, how can businesses leverage those really effectively and get the data visualizations as well? I think that's like the combo thing that's tough here, because usually they set it up, but then they don't really know how to tap in and get visualizations.
Yeah. So the first step is to really understand that end goal, because you need to know that to start to understand your KPIs. You need to know your KPIs before you can start visualizing stuff. So you've really got to start with what actually is the point of all of this. What are we trying to measure? And that might vary across different channels as well. I always have a discussion with people about who's the end user for this visualization. Is it a person within the marketing team who maybe already has a fairly strong knowledge and understanding of what the different metrics mean and why they're important? Or is it somebody outside of the marketing team, or maybe just somebody who doesn't have a lot of knowledge and experience in the marketing industry? And if we say to them, active users on a website, they won't know what that means. So we have to think about the data that we give to different people. Different people are going to need different data, and data is going to mean different things to different people as well. And then also I find the level of complexity of the data is also very much dependent on the end user. The marketing team might need to know in a great level of detail the different website traffic referrers from referral traffic. They might need to know that because they might be looking out for anomalies or things that they need to add as referral exclusions in their Google Analytics. Whereas somebody who maybe is like the business development officer within the company probably doesn't need to know about that. What are we trying to actually achieve here? And then thinking about, well, who is the end user, because that's going to impact the data that we visualize.
Makes a lot of sense. And I know that there's obviously this big elephant in the room, right? I'd love to know from your perspective, what do you feel like AI is bringing here in terms of shaping these tools, future of analytics with AI integrations and AI features?
AI, but you can set it anyway to automatically ping you an email if it notices anomalies within your data. So that could be if it spikes, it could be if it drops off the edge of a cliff. I usually have mine set to send me an email automatically if my website users go down or up by more than 20% every week. If you've got a big site, you might want to do that daily. Data is becoming easier because we don't have to look for these things as much. I think it's still important to have human eyes on a lot of this. When it comes to anomaly detection, again, I don't really know if it's technically classed as AI, but certainly a lot of the built-in features, the main analytics platforms, things like Piwik Pro, Hockey Stack, all have anomaly detection, and they're all pretty good at alerting you to those things. So you don't really have to do that yourself.
I feel like that is a really good use of AI because it'll just give you more of that awareness around your data sooner. Yeah,
exactly.
With that kind of in mind, Chloe, how has artificial intelligence changed the way that we approach SEO and PPC, especially from the data side?
In my experience, I tend to do more in the PPC world than in the SEO world. From PPC perspective, there's a lot going on at the moment, especially with Google. The algorithms have definitely improved. If you tried to run broad match keywords on Google Ads a few years ago, things would not have gone very well for you most of the time. But the algorithms seem to be getting a lot better, and I assume there's some sort of AI going on in the background there. I think there's some stuff that's come into, especially Google Ads, that's maybe not so helpful. We've got AI headline and description writers now, and they're not always particularly good. I think there's still a bit of a ways to go there, and having human eyes on that is definitely worthwhile. From an SEO standpoint, there's a lot of AI tools now, and I think it can be quite overwhelming, the sheer quantity. I regularly visit AppSumo, and everything just seems to be SEO AI tools now, which I'm not complaining about, but also it is overwhelming. There's a lot of options. I think in time, keyword research will become easier. I think analysis of content will become easier. I know Bic has a content analysis tool, which again, I don't know if it is AI or not, but it looks at your website. You put a page on it from your website and it compares your page to all the other pages that rank in the top like 12 positions or something for the keyword that you're trying to target, and it makes suggestions for the content based on that comparison. I think things like that are potentially really helpful. But equally, I do think there's a bit of a ways to go, especially with things like keyword research tools. But although they're not a keyword research tool, and I definitely wouldn't rely on them as a keyword research tool, I think they can be incredibly helpful for idea generation. So if you say to ChatGPT, I'm looking for idea generation of what people might search for around this topic, it's going to give you loads of suggestions, and then you can use those suggestions in a keyword research tool if you wanted to do so. But yeah, do you think we've got a bit of a ways that?
So I'm totally with you. I feel like with regard to keyword research, not such because there are tools for that. AI is more helpful on evaluation, sorting, clustering, and getting like insights from patterns. It's fascinating to see how it's being implemented across so many tools to look at content parity, broadness, specificity in some cases, and then to give you suggestions. How do you feel these tools are kind of helping with personalization and like campaign strategy?
Personalization, I do think that there's been a lot of development in that area, but with content and actual strategy, I think it's very helpful again for research purposes. And I think it's probably going to continue to.
I know it's like hairy.
There is. I mean, my biggest use of AI is going to be ChatGPT and the various different tools that have been built around ChatGPT. And I use this every day from an ads perspective, but I think more than anything, in terms of strategy, I'm actually more asking it questions about, I don't know, it could be anything from, is this UTM parameter right for this campaign? Or I'm trying to think of things I might have asked it in the last few days, because I'm sure there's been loads of stuff. I just think there's so many, you can't test all of them. But I think it's great for, you mentioned this already, but keyword clustering. You can give it a whole list of keywords and say, put these together, which ones are actually related to each other and which ones not so much. How do I structure my ad groups based on all of these different keywords that I want to utilize? I think that can be really helpful. But in terms of actually creating ads and things like that, there doesn't seem to be a lot out there at the moment. I think there's still a lot of requirement for human eyes on that aspect of things.
Yeah, and I think that's still wise. I mean, like you said, it's good at taking some things and being creative, and other times not so much. And especially if it's using the same formula or same kind of like format, it's more interesting to have a human take on that. And obviously, we understand the messaging a little bit better. But I think that'll evolve over time. We'll just have to kind of keep our eyes open and watch. I think a lot of people are definitely still concerned though about like how this change is impacting the potential concerns over jobs, right? Because our SEO and paid search people or paid search specialists like in danger from AI taking over. And I think I would love to get your perspective on that because it's a big topic.
I don't see AI, quote unquote, taking over anything substantially in the next like 3 to 5 years based on its current progression. I don't think so, but I'm not an expert. And I think if you work in the sector, you either close your eyes, decide you hate it and avoid it, but you're not doing yourself any favors, or you begin to utilize AI as part of your day to day. And that might not necessarily be initially integrating that directly into your work. I use AI a lot for helping with things like email. I have automation set up in Zapier that will take Firefly's AI and things like that record your meetings It'll take that after my meeting, it will write that up into a follow-up email I can send to the client, dumps it in my drafts in Gmail ready to go. I just have to read it and send it off. That's not directly to do with my work. That's more organization and admin, more so than anything else. The more you can streamline your efforts in those areas, the more time you have to either do more work, actual work, rather than busy work, or the more time you have for learning about your work and improving your work. So I think there's a use case for pretty much everybody. I know for me, certainly, if I look back over the last year, I've been able to take more on and do more work more quickly because of AI, because it's cut down so much on the time it takes me to reply to emails, the time I spend writing up meeting notes, all those mundane things that probably used to take up half my day, now maybe take up an hour and a half of my day.
That's beautifully said, and a really good example. I was definitely going to get into like where AI kind of assists us, and like, but it's still a human in the loop. And the fact is, like, the human still has to do a lot of work. And in our case, we're the ones that are figuring out how to do these things. But we have this as a virtual assistant, right? A little piece of us that we don't have to worry about dealing with tedium. So I appreciate your response there, and that leads me to kind of thinking a little bit more about additional questions about the future, right? There's a lot changing. We don't have a crystal ball. I'm not asking you to predict because I know that things are changing at a very different pace. And sometimes it's slower and other times it's extremely fast. But given that, are there any exciting like future trends that you are seeing in AI powered tools in analytics?
I think there's not that many good ones at the moment, but we've had some recent developments and stuff, and there's definitely some stuff going on. With Looker Studio, which is my primary data visualization tool, we've had a couple of AI powered updates and things that have come in there. One of which actually came out very recently. I want to say in the last couple of weeks or so. And that was the integration of Gemini within Looker Studio. Now, it's not there to help you with everything. You can't just go on and say, create me the best looking Facebook ads report I've ever seen, and it will just put loads of data on the page for you. It will help with things like creating formulas. So if you are struggling to figure out, maybe you've got 4 or 5 different metrics and you need to create 3 others from those 4 or 5, it will help you to figure out what the formulas are for those. And it will help you if you've written a formula and it's not quite right, it's coming up with null values when it shouldn't, it'll help you there as well. I think that's quite helpful, and maybe in the long run we'll get more and more updates to these kinds of things. Maybe really they're just testing the waters at this point. I'm sure there's a lot of cost involved in developing these things, so they're not going to want to develop things that nobody's going to use. But I think we'll get there in time with more tools for AI and visualization. But yeah, at the moment there isn't that many around.
Yeah, I can kind of reflect that because I've seen them do small integrations with some of the platforms. I haven't seen much in like other services like Tableau or anything like that. So they're probably like testing the waters very carefully there, and I think that's wise. When you're talking about critical data and visualizations, you want to make sure you get it right.
Yeah, and I think companies will tread carefully. Maybe that's why we've not seen as many independent tools pop up. There's been a lot of independent tools pop up in SEO, as you'll know. Even with PPC, there's been quite a few. I think SEO is probably the biggest kind of marketing sector, or certainly that I've seen had tools pop up in. But we've had tools pop up in PPC. I've not really noticed anything much pop up in data. And I think maybe in part that's because of privacy and security. If you're dealing with data, that could get dangerous.
That's an excellent segue because I was going to talk a little bit about that hairy topic, like between data bias, privacy issues, ethical concerns. There's so much to it. And you said they have been like AI overviews in Google, for example, in the search results that have touched on that and have been a little dangerous because they're talking about your money or your life type topics. and they haven't been right, concerning to a lot of people. So I imagine that this is just something that they can control rather than something that they didn't realize. But what are your thoughts on some of the primary ethical concerns or bias concerns or data privacy concerns that you've encountered or that you feel very strongly about?
So firstly, I'm not a data privacy expert, but I would strongly advise reading the terms and conditions of anything that you sign up to that you might be giving any sort of data to, including things like ChatGPT. I personally don't upload data to ChatGPT. I only ask it questions, and if I do have to give it any kind of numbers, I'll always make sure that data is anonymized before doing so, because I don't really know what they're going to be doing with that data. And I do believe it's written into their terms that they can use it for training the algorithm. And I'm sure a lot of other tools are very similar. As tedious as they are, and as much as we never ever read them, this might be one of the times you do want to read the terms and conditions so it doesn't bite you in the butt at a later date. But I think ethically, if you volunteer your data to these platforms and you have read and understand the terms of doing so, I don't see that there's any issue. I think the problem occurs when these platforms, especially things like ChatGPT, are utilizing information from websites and not crediting those websites. I can see why people would be annoyed about that. And I know there's been issues raised in the art sectors as well, in things like music and art, that there's a line somewhere between taking inspiration and copying, and nobody quite knows exactly where that line lay when it comes to AI. So I think that's something that maybe we'll even see governments.
I'm fascinated to see that because, like you said, there have been a lot of lawsuits, a lot of protesting because of obvious concerns around content theft. And we're going to call it content theft because that's basically what it is. And just reinventing or spinning it around isn't making it original. It is a concern, and the technology is here for a reason, but we do have to have our reins on it, right? And I think governments and some other organizations are going to have some say. Then we're just going to have to wait and see. But it is a concern for a lot of individuals or people that are practitioners in the space, marketers, just because it's like you work so hard to create all this stuff and then it's just stolen. That's not the greatest feeling in the world.
I would just be cautious with it. I think that's all you can do. If you're going to use it, just be very careful. And if you're actually uploading data yourself to these platforms, any of them, only give it data or information that you would be prepared to have somebody else read.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't really go wrong from your side. There's nothing you can do about controlling the data that they're scraping off the internet. That's already out there for the world to see. And I can't stop OpenAI doing that. I can't stop Google doing that. But I can control the information I give it. So just be cautious. Don't give it anything that you wouldn't want out there in the public realm.
It's funny that you said like to read the terms and conditions. Obviously, people tend to skip that and it's a little daunting. And usually these are very boring documents. But pro tip, just throw that back into ChatGPT and get a summarization of it. So you at least understand. If you don't want to go and read the whole thing, at least you get something that you can read through and have a better understanding of and ask questions for.
Definitely worth it.
I'd love for you to share with the audience 2 to 3 of your most actionable tips. I know you kind of shared some information earlier, but like maybe you have some unique tips for folks that could help them with their data analysis and understand things a little bit better.
The first thing I would always advise anyone to do is just try. I know it sounds so basic, but if you, let's say you go to Looker Studio, which is arguably one of the most utilized data visualization tools, it used to be Google Data Studio. You can't accidentally delete your data. You can't accidentally just mess something up somewhere and it will never work again. It's basically a canvas that you can paint yourself. I personally try to have something in mind already before I start creating anything. So I will know, okay, I want to go into this and create, let's talk very simply here. I want to create a graph with my overall website traffic for the last 12 months, and then I want to add a filter in to be able to filter that by traffic session default channel groupings. I've got that in my head. I know what I'm trying to achieve. And then maybe you pull in AI tools, things like ChatGPT, to help you achieve that. Just ask it, how do I do this thing on this platform? And it will most likely, most of the time, give you the right answer. But just dive in, have a go, have a goal in mind and just go for it. Again, you can't break anything. Same thing actually in your Google Analytics. So we touched on this at the start, but I posted that video on LinkedIn where I showed people how to create custom reports in Google Analytics, left-hand menu column that's in there. And one of the things I mentioned on that was just give it a go. Worst case is you make something and it doesn't work or it's a bit of a mess. You just delete it. The data's not going anywhere and you're not going to break it. If you are really looking to get something down and build a visualization and you need outside help, there are plenty of people who work in this area of expertise who would be more than willing to help, and they'll probably ask you a few fairly basic questions. As soon as I speak to someone, they start telling me the purpose of the report, the channels that they need, and what the overarching goal is for their website or project. I have it in my head what it's probably going to look like, and I'm sure most other data visualization people will be exactly the same. So you can come to people like us, have a 20-minute conversation with us, and we'll probably be able to get you something that's more or less in line with exactly what you need within a few days. So there's options out there to get help and assistance, but I really, really recommend going into these platforms and just having a go. Same with your Google Analytics, just go in and click things and see what you can find. You can't break anything, so just dive in.
I think that's the best advice ever, because clearly, if you're not destroying anything, you might as well experiment and be curious, right?
Exactly, just be curious. And maybe there's people out there who want the data but don't necessarily want to learn how to make those visualizations, and that's fine. And that's where people like me come in. I think people come to me, they say, this is what I need, this is the purpose of this dashboard or presentation style report, whatever it might be, and we build it for them. You can do that, that's an option too. So you can really go any way about it that you want, but don't be put off, I think, by the fact that it can be a bit scary, especially from an outside perspective. If you have a need for your data, but you're struggling to understand it, just speak to somebody and somebody will help.
That you get a ton of folks looking at one of your dashboards and saying, can you do this, but with Y?
Every single day, I get messages from people saying, oh, I saw you posted this and we need the same kind of thing, but we also need it for Meta. Absolutely fine. There's loads of people out there on LinkedIn who are more than happy to help with visualization, but if you want to have a go yourself, just get stuck in. You won't break anything. You can't break anything.
That's awesome. And well, on that note, are there any tools that you would recommend people get their hands on to create data visualizations? Besides, I mean, you mentioned Looker, but are there any other ones that you think are not as obvious?
Tableau is quite widely used. My platform of preference is Looker, and I personally think it's the most user-friendly. So if you're getting started with data visualization, I would start there. It has direct integration with your Google Analytics, Google Ads, all your Google services, and then you've got third-party connectors to connect other services as well. So Power Analytics, Supermetrics, Reporting Ninja. I really, really recommend Reporting Ninja. A lot of people, I don't think, have heard of Reporting Ninja. I think Power Analytics and Supermetrics are the most popular. But Reporting Ninja, if you just want fairly basic channels, they offer all of the social channels, HubSpot, I believe, and MailChimp. They offer reporting for those, and they have some pretty good templates available as well that you can use in Looker. I recommend Reporting Ninja because I've always found them to be reliable, and I also know that they are the cheapest, if not one of the cheapest, third-party connectors. Supermetrics is also very good, but people often end up paying for connectors that they're not using because their pricing plans go up very, very quickly. So absolutely do check them out as well. It's just, I think their top plan is about $900 a month, whereas Reporting Ninjas is like 90. So big difference between the plans. But yeah, sign up for things like Looker and one of those connectors and just start visualizing. If you go to Pinterest and type in dashboard, something very simple, you'll get loads of inspiration for dashboards come up on there and loads of AI generated designs. Find an AI generated design and try and recreate that design, but with your actual data in it in Looker. It's a challenge. I did a little challenge as well a while ago where I tried to create a report in under an hour. That was quite fun. Actually took me an hour and 5 minutes in the end, but that was just, I couldn't drop it. The last, I was like, no, I have to finish this. It's going to get finished in the next 5 minutes. I have to finish it. But yeah, just sign up for these different services. Try Tableau as well. It's really popular, but I think it's not as user-friendly as some of the others. I think Looker is the best one for a beginner.
I'll talk about right brain meets left brain. I love that, the challenge concept, because first of all, yeah, trying to mimic something that has not been created, but that AI has generated, and then making it useful. that's how, and in an hour, like, or even if you give yourself 2 hours, it might be difficult.
We did a Mario themed LinkedIn report that unfortunately I wasn't able to give away because I can't, for copyright purposes. I'm not allowed to let people copy it. But I just created it and I did post about it on LinkedIn. There are loads of really, really beautiful AI ones. And if you can even just use them as inspiration, you don't necessarily have to copy them. But if you go on there and have a look, there'll be loads of things that you can pull from. The other thing that you can do is when I visualize data and it's for a very specific company, I will try and mimic the look and feel of their website. And I think that can be useful sometimes just for starting your brain thinking about layout, colors, and design, because it's already, the colors, layout, and design are kind of already there on the website. It's just for you then to take that and put charts and stuff on it and make it make sense.
I don't know why, but now you got in my head, you got an image of Super Mario stuck going down a pipe, and when you do that, then the data refreshes.
Would be so good.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Chloe. This has been enlightening. I think folks have learned a lot here as well. I would love to give you the opportunity to mention how folks can follow you and kind of keep up to date with data viz, through your work.
You can follow me on LinkedIn. I try to be active on there, but it's a productivity vacuum, isn't it? I'm not on there all the time, but follow me on there and you'll be able to see anything new that I put out. And if you don't mind me mentioning as well, we are going to be releasing a Looker Studio dashboard template gallery where you'll be able to purchase the templates that we've put out. So all the Google Analytics ones, all the Google Ads ones, they're all going to go onto our store. I think it's going to launch in a couple of weeks' time, and you'll be able to buy all the stuff that I put out, and then you can take it and do whatever the hell you please with it.
That is so cool. Look, I think a lot of people will take you up on that because clearly not everybody has the skill, the desire, or the time to make these beautiful things, but they need them, especially when you're talking about sharing stories and convincing others to buy into your vision or your initiative. So I really appreciate you covering that. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Please support the show by subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment. It's free and helps us grow and get even better content for you. And it's also appreciated.